Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, uh, Today we're going to look at something that's been in the headlines a lot lately,
Mm,
this whole AI thing.
AI.
But more specifically, how it's impacting journalism and the legal battles brewing over copyright.
Right, and it's a big one.
It is. I mean, you got these huge news outlets basically going head to head with these tech giants, all because of, uh, well, how AI learns.
Yeah, how they're using the data.
Exactly.
Uh,
So we've got a really interesting article here that's packed with legal opinions on all of this.
Mm.
I mean, it really gets into how messy this whole intersection of AI and copyright law and the future of news really is.
And Messi is putting it lightly. I
Yeah,
think it's a high stakes game for everybody involved.
definitely high stakes for sure.
Because, if you think about it, if a news organization's entire work, their whole, their bread and butter is used to train an AI without them seeing a dime,
Right.
what does that do to their business model, their ability to, pay journalists to do the work?
That's a really good point. I mean, it undermines the whole
Right.
industry.
The whole thing.
So journalists are obviously, concerned about their work being used this way without permission or payment.
Of course.
But legally speaking, is this
Yeah.
even allowed? Like, where do we stand on
Well,
that?
that's where it gets really interesting because according to Alina Tripova, she's a legal expert. She
Yeah.
specializes in EU and UK law.
Okay.
And she was quoted in this article
Mm-hmm.
basically saying we haven't really seen any definitive court rulings on this yet.
Wow.
So we're in uncharted territory.
Really uncharted territory.
Legally speaking, yeah.
So how do we even start to figure out what copying even means in this context? I mean,
Ah.
is training an AI model on a news article the same as, say, photocopying it?
I mean, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's a whole new ballgame. And Christian Memon, who's a U.S.-based IP lawyer, he was also featured in the article.
Okay.
He points out that U.S. law basically hinges on two key questions.
All right, I'm listening.
So first, does training an AI on existing content like articles, does that actually count as copying?
Okay, that makes sense.
And then second, even if it is copying, could it be considered fair use?
Okay, wait, hold on. Fair use.
Yeah.
I thought that usually applied to things like quoting a small passage for a book review or something.
Right.
How would AI training even fit into that?
Well, that's exactly the argument that AI companies are likely to make, right?
Okay.
They would say, well, look, we're using this content for research and development, which, those are generally considered fair use under U.S. copyright law.
But I mean, isn't the outcome of that research a commercial product
Yeah.
that generates its own content?
Yeah, you've got a point there because it's not really like a student quoting a couple lines from a news article in their history paper, is it?
Exactly. It's way beyond that.
It is, and you've hit on a major point of contention here
Okay.
because critics argue that once you go beyond that research phase and you move into commercialization,
Right.
the fair use defense kind of falls apart
It does.
because it becomes less about learning and more about profiting from somebody else's work.
Right. Using their work to make money
Exactly.
without really, compensating them for it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at a real world example.
Yeah, let's get specific.
The article dives into the New York Times versus OpenAI case. If you've been following this,
Oh, yeah, I've been reading about it. It's fascinating.
it is. So the Times is alleging that OpenAI not only trained its models on their articles without permission,
Right.
but it's also producing content that is eerily similar
Yeah.
to their original reporting.
It can be really hard to tell the difference.
Yeah, and what I found really interesting was that OpenAI actually claims it took them tens of thousands of attempts to generate an article similar to one published by the Times,
Wow.
which kind of gives us a glimpse into how these large language models are working.
Definitely.
Like they're learning, adapting, and mimicking human writing
Mm-hmm.
in ways that we're only beginning to understand.
Yeah. It's kind of scary when you think about it.
It is a little bit.
Yeah.
So even if the AI isn't directly copying and pasting,
Right.
if the output is similar enough to the original source, that could still be considered copyright infringement.
Absolutely. I mean, paraphrasing, even, substantial paraphrasing, can still violate copyright.
Wow.
It's not just about word-for-word replication.
I see.
It's about the underlying ideas and the creative expression.
Okay. So it's about the essence of it.
Exactly.
So this case is still in the discovery phase.
Right.
But lawyers are reportedly finding internal OpenAI communications
Uh-oh.
that could really bolster the Times case.
Interesting.
And the Times publisher has been very vocal about this,
Yeah, what are they saying?
stating that journalism simply can't survive
Right.
if its work is freely exploited in this way.
I mean, it's a valid concern,
Right.
right?
Yeah, and this brings up a really interesting point about the power dynamics at play here.
For sure.
We're seeing these huge media companies making deals
Yeah.
with these AI companies,
Mm-hmm.
but those agreements are notoriously secretive.
Right, very hush-hush.
So what about the smaller publications? Where do they fit into all of this?
Yeah, it's almost like a classic Silicon Valley playbook, isn't it?
What do you mean?
Well, move fast, break things,
Right. Yeah.
deal with the consequences later.
We've seen this before.
Right, like with Uber and Airbnb.
Exactly.
And like you said, it creates this huge power imbalance,
Yeah.
especially for smaller news outlets that, might not have the legal resources to fight a really long legal battle.
They don't have the deep pockets
Exactly.
to go up against, these huge tech companies.
Right, and who can blame them?
But even if these deals provide some, temporary stability,
Mm-hmm.
Mammon argues that the lawsuits are still crucial.
Okay, I'm curious about that. Why?
Why are the lawsuits so important, even if these companies are making deals?
Yeah.
Well, he says it's because these legal battles will ultimately establish precedents
Makes sense.
that determine the market value of news content in this new AI-driven world.
I see.
So kind of like setting the price for a brand new commodity.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, so we need those legal precedents to
Yeah.
kind of figure out what is this worth.
Yeah, how do we value it?
Exactly, how do we value it?
And then, on top of that, Trapova adds that having contracts and licenses in place,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what happens with these lawsuits, would bring some much-needed certainty to a really murky situation.
Right. Right now, it's so unclear.
It is.
Nobody knows where they stand.
And that's the problem. It's about knowing where you stand.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really thorny issue, I think.
Okay, what's that?
The global nature of the internet.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
I mean, if an American company uses content from, say, a German news site, whose laws apply?
A good question, isn't it?
It seems like a recipe for
Yeah.
legal headaches and international disputes.
A lot of headaches.
So Mammon actually believes that this clash of legal jurisdictions could become a major challenge, potentially even impacting national economic interests.
Wow.
But the EU has taken a really proactive approach with its AI Act.
Okay, tell me more about this AI Act.
So how does it come into play here?
Yeah.
Well, it's a landmark piece of legislation, and it essentially says that any AI system operating within the EU has to comply with EU copyright laws,
Wow.
regardless of where that AI was developed or is based.
Okay, so it doesn't matter where it came from if it's operating in the EU.
Right.
It's got to follow those rules.
It has to play by their rules.
Interesting.
It's an attempt to level the playing field and protect the rights of creators within the EU.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. And how does this actually play out in real-world scenarios?
Well, we can look at the Getty Images lawsuits against Stability AI.
Okay, I've heard of them.
They build those text-to-image generators.
Right.
And Getty has filed lawsuits in both the UK and the US.
Oh, wow.
Which highlights how complex these international copyright disputes can be.
So even if an AI company is based in one country,
Right.
they could still be held accountable to the laws of another country where their AI is being used.
That's right. And it raises a critical question, I think,
Yeah, what's that?
about developing countries and their news organizations.
Okay.
Because do they even have the legal and financial resources
Right.
to protect their intellectual property on this global stage?
That's a really worrying thought because it almost feels like they're at a disadvantage from the start.
Yeah, it's a valid concern.
And what happens if different countries issue conflicting legal rulings on this whole AI and copyright thing?
Oh, man.
Wouldn't that create even more confusion and uncertainty?
Absolutely. It would be a nightmare for everyone involved.
Yeah, it would be a mess.
A total mess.
So it really does feel like the Wild West out there right now, legally speaking.
It really does.
But, like you mentioned earlier, the legal system tends to adapt, even if it takes time.
Yeah, it usually catches up eventually.
And photography comes to mind.
Oh, that's a good example.
When photography first emerged, the courts had to figure out how copyright applied
Right.
to this whole new medium.
Totally new.
And they did.
They figured it out.
They figured it out eventually.
It just takes time.
It does take time.
And a lot of legal wrangling.
Right. So just like with photography, I think we'll see the law adapt to the unique challenges posed by AI.
I think so, too. And in fact, Trapova actually predicts that new UK legislation specifically addressing AI and copyright is already on the horizon.
So some clarity might be coming soon, at least in the UK.
It sounds like it.
What about the US? What are some of the unique legal questions being raised there?
Well, one that's particularly thorny is that U.S. law currently doesn't recognize AI-generated content as copyrightable.
Wait, really?
Yeah, and it's because the law as it stands requires a human creator
Okay.
for a work to be eligible for copyright protection.
So if an AI writes an article or even a whole book,
Yeah,
there's no legal ownership.
that's the situation right now,
Wow.
which obviously creates a lot of uncertainty and potential for exploitation.
It does, because, I mean, who owns it then?
Exactly, raises so many questions.
Yeah.
If an AI generates content, who owns it? Can it be licensed? Can it be sold?
Oh, good question.
Yeah, we don't have the answers yet.
And if the law does change to allow for AI copyright,
Right.
what implications would that have for human creators?
Another good question.
Would we see like a whole new class of rights holders emerge?
It's possible, and these are all really complex questions that legal scholars and policymakers are grappling with right now.
Yeah, that they are.
It's, like I said before, uncharted territory.
It is.
And while the legal system might be slow to catch up mammon cautions against rushing into new laws
Okay.
without carefully considering the unintended consequences.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
We don't want to solve one problem only to create a whole bunch of new ones.
Exactly.
What kind of unintended consequences are we talking about?
Well, he brought up this really interesting hypothetical.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
What if AI is restricted from imitating human artistic styles?
Okay.
Could that then be used against human artists who are heavily influenced by others?
That's interesting.
Yeah. Where do you draw the line between inspiration and infringement?
It's a blurry line for sure.
Yeah, very blurry.
That reminds me of all the debates we've seen around sampling in music.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like, at what point does borrowing from existing work become a violation of copyright?
Right. Is it homage or is it stealing?
And it gets even more complicated with AI.
It does.
It can learn and adapt in ways that we don't fully understand.
Exactly. And that's why these discussions are so important.
They are.
As AI becomes more integrated into creative fields.
Because we need to find that balance
We do.
between, protecting the rights of creators
Right.
and fostering innovation.
It's a tough one,
It is a tough one.
but we have to figure it out.
The article touched upon another interesting point, this idea that journalism is a creative industry
Yes.
built on reputation and complex business models.
Right. It's not just about churning out factual information.
It's not just about getting the facts out there.
No, there's so much more to it.
There's a lot of skill and expertise involved in crafting a compelling narrative,
Definitely.
building trust with your audience, developing sustainable revenue streams.
Which is getting harder and harder these days.
It is, and that's where this whole uncertainty around AI and copyright becomes particularly problematic.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Even if the law is unclear, people often prefer the certainty of signed contracts and licenses.
That's true. It's about knowing who has the right to use what and for what purpose.
Exactly. It's about managing risk and establishing clear boundaries.
Which is especially important
Yeah.
for smaller publishers who might not have the resources for these lengthy legal battles.
They're already struggling as it is.
They are.
So even in the absence of clear legal precedents, having those agreements in place can provide some much-needed stability
Definitely some peace of mind.
and protect those who are most vulnerable in this evolving landscape.
Absolutely. It's about finding ways to support both innovation and the people who create the content that fuels it.
Right.
We need to make sure that journalism in all its forms can thrive in this new age of AI.
And it feels like we're at a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
Not just for journalism, but for all creative industries.
Mm,
These early legal battles are really just the tip of the iceberg.
I think so too.
The decisions made today will have ripple effects for years to come.
No doubt about it.
So it's not just about legal technicalities
Right.
or technological advancements.
Mhm.
It's about redefining creativity and authorship in the digital age.
Big questions.
And that brings us back to this fundamental question.
Yeah.
What does the future of journalism even look like in an AI-driven world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah, it really does make you think, like, what role will human reporters play?
Right. Will we even need them?
I mean, is that the future? AI just takes over and...
It's the million-dollar question.
It is.
Some might argue that AI could actually be a good thing in a way.
Okay, how so?
Well, it could potentially automate some of the more mundane aspects of journalism.
Like, what kind of things are we talking about?
Like data collection or basic reporting.
The stuff nobody really wants to do.
Exactly. And that would free up human journalists
Oh,
to focus on the things that AI can't really do.
Like what?
like really in-depth investigations, nuanced analysis, compelling storytelling.
So instead of replacing journalists altogether,
Right.
AI could actually become a tool that kind of enhances their capabilities.
Think of it like the printing press.
Okay. I like
You
where you're
know,
going with this.
it didn't eliminate the need for writers, right?
It didn't.
It just changed how they work and the reach they could achieve.
That's a good point. I mean, we often fear the new and unknown,
We do. It's human nature.
but history shows us that technology tends to evolve alongside human ingenuity, not necessarily replace it completely.
And that brings us back to this idea that human creativity is something really special.
Which it is.
Something truly valuable.
Right. And even with all these advancements in AI,
There's still something unique about a story that's crafted by a human being.
yeah, with all its imperfections.
Right, with all its insights.
Yeah, that human element,
Yeah.
that ability to connect with readers on an emotional level.
To evoke empathy and understanding.
Right, exactly. That feels irreplaceable to me.
I agree. And it's not just about the writing itself.
What else is about?
It's about the critical thinking, the ethical considerations,
Right.
the fact-checking, the ability to discern truth from falsehood.
Which is more important than ever these days.
It is, and those are all qualities that, we as humans bring to the table.
And it makes you wonder if investigative journalism,
Yeah,
the kind that holds power to account,
right.
exposes wrongdoing,
Mm-hmm.
will that become even more crucial in a world where information can be manipulated and generated so easily?
Oh, absolutely, because we need skilled journalists who can sift through all the noise.
Yeah, separate fact from fiction.
Exactly. Verify information, present the truth in a way that really resonates with people.
I mean, this deep dive has really made me think about the value of human journalism in a whole new light.
It's powerful stuff.
It's not just about conveying information. It's about context. It's about insight. It's about holding a mirror up to society.
And as we navigate this increasingly complex world,
Yeah, with all this AI and information overload.
right, those human qualities are only going to become more essential.
I think you're right. So where do we go from here? What can our listeners do to kind of stay informed and engaged in this whole evolving conversation?
Well, I think the most important thing is to stay curious and critical.
Okay.
Don't take everything you read or see at face value.
Question everything.
Exactly. Ask questions, challenge assumptions, seek out diverse perspectives.
Don't just stay in your echo chamber.
Exactly. Get out there and explore different viewpoints.
And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Oh, yeah, we're just getting started.
The legal battles, the technological advancements, the ethical considerations.
It's all still unfolding.
It is, and we'll continue to explore these issues as the story evolves.
Definitely stay tuned.
But for now, I think we've given you a pretty good overview of the copyright conundrum at the heart of this AI and journalism debate.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From the legal arguments to the potential impact on news organizations and even the philosophical implications of AI creativity.
And I think we've also raised some really important questions for our listeners to ponder.
Yeah. What are they thinking?
I mean, what does the future of news look like in this AI-driven world? What value do you personally place on human journalism? And what role do you want to play in shaping this evolving landscape?
Those are the big questions.
They
The
are.
ones we all need to be thinking about.
It's a big one. Yeah, and it makes you wonder, like, if AI can generate news content, what role will human reporters even play?
Right. I mean, will we even need them?
Is that the future? Just AI doing all the reporting and
I mean, it's possible, but I think it's more likely that AI will augment human journalism.
like so augment, not replace.
Exactly. Like, think about it. AI could handle things like data analysis,
Right.
identifying trends in data.
Right.
Or even generating basic news reports based on, like, structured data, like financial earnings or sports scores.
Okay, so it's like taking care of the more routine stuff.
Right. The stuff that's maybe not as creatively demanding.
That would free up human journalists to focus on more complex things.
Exactly. Like in-depth investigations.
Yeah.
Really digging into a story, uncovering the truth.
And also like crafting narratives that really connect with readers.
Exactly, because AI isn't really good at that yet.
Yeah.
That human touch.
The storytelling aspect.
Right, exactly. And I think that's where human journalists will always have an edge.
So it's not just about reporting the facts.
No, it's about weaving them into a compelling story.
A story that resonates with people on an emotional level.
Exactly. And I think that's something that AI will struggle to replicate.
And it makes you wonder if investigative journalism will become even more important
For sure.
in this kind of AI-driven world.
Because we need people who can really dig deep, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Hold power to account, expose wrongdoing.
Because information can be manipulated so easily now.
Right, and AI can be used to generate fake news, propaganda, all sorts of things.
So it's even more crucial to have those human journalists out there.
Who can be watchdogs.
Yeah, holding people accountable.
Exactly, and verifying information.
And this deep dive has really made me think about the value of human journalism in a whole new light.
Yeah, it's something we often take for granted.
We do.
But it's so essential to a functioning democracy.
And it's not just about conveying information.
No.
It's about providing context.
Yeah, giving us different perspectives.
Helping us understand the world around us.
And it's about holding a mirror up to society, showing us who we are.
Exactly. And as we move further into this world of AI and this constant influx of information,
Right, information overload.
those human qualities are only going to become more important.
I think you're right. So where do we go from here? What can our listeners do to stay informed?
To stay engaged in this whole conversation.
Yeah, because it's not going away. It's not, and I think the most important thing is to stay curious.
Okay.
And to stay critical.
So don't just passively consume information.
No question, everything.
Challenge the assumptions.
Exactly, look for evidence.
Seek out different perspectives.
Don't just stay in your little bubble,
Right. Get out of your echo chamber.
Exactly. And remember that this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, we've just scratched the surface.
We have. And the legal battles, the technological advancements, the ethical considerations.
It's all still unfolding.
It is, so stay tuned.
We'll be here to guide you through it.
We will.
Well, that's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And until next time, stay curious.